Great. We are live. Hi, everybody. I'm Skylar from the FormAssembly team. If you're joining us today and you were hoping to see a training webinar on working with file uploads in the Salesforce Workflow Connector, then yep, you are in the right place. I've got a lot to get into here. I'm going to be kind of a hype man for our knowledge and training team on this one. We're going to have a fun kind of what we call build along, where we not only show you the ins and outs of this feature, but really give you some click-by-click guidance for it today. But before I do that, I want to make sure everyone kind of filters in here, and also that give you kind of a heads up, a little bit of housekeeping up front. If it's been a bit since you joined us for one of these, or if this is your first FormAssembly webinar in a bit, we use a webinar platform called On24. It's responsible for the setup you see on your screen today. But there's a few things we'd love to point out. One is that yes, those kind of different blocks and areas you see around the screen, you can absolutely control those. If you want to drag and drop things around, change your view of whatever's being presented at the moment, go for that, play around with that if you'd like. Definitely would like to point out one of those boxes, which is the Q&A box. That one's going to queue up questions for the speakers today. We'll be able to try to get to those, as many as we can at least, towards the end. We've got a lot to show, but submit those questions anytime. We'll have some dedicated time at the end to dig into that and answer stuff for the group. So use that Q&A box. There's also an area, you'll hear us refer to it over and over as kind of the resources area. We're going to get into a number of different features that we show off today. It's really hard to get super in-depth with FormAssembly in just under an hour or so. So some of those additional resources, we're going to have some links to other helpful documents, areas in our help documentation that deal with some of these features, some better places to sort of take today's discussion and kind of hop off and keep learning after this. So yeah, again, a little bit of housekeeping for that area. And to head off one of our most common Q&A questions right up from the front, we absolutely are recording this. If we go a little bit fast today, or you'd love to revisit something, right after the webinar, we're going to be packing all this up, sending it to your inbox. So yep, being recorded and will be sent out to you. Don't worry about that. Okay, enough of that. Again, if you've joined us for these, over the months and years, the person I'm going to introduce might not be a surprise, but I'm always excited to see her. I hope you are too. Joelle, how's it going?
Hey, Skylar. Hey, everyone. It is going good. Just trying to enjoy the summer and cool off. It has definitely been hot here in Omaha, but I'm so excited to come here and join you guys and walk you through just sending those files to Salesforce. Don't think I mentioned, but I'm the product trainer for those of you who haven't seen my face before. And I've been here at FormAssembly for about 5.5 years now. So definitely have seen all of our customers and all of their creativity. And I just love seeing that. And also just helping any customers that are like, what more can I do? How can I learn? And what can I do with all of these different features? And so with that today, I just kind of want to see how many of you guys are currently using file uploads to your Salesforce. Are you using that? Have you not tried it yet? Just gonna click that poll and see where you guys are all at. Skylar,
Yeah.
have you used the file uploads yet?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this really is one of those features. Sounds simple on the surface, but maybe if you haven't kind of audited your Salesforce instance, or you're not super involved in like the Salesforce admin side, this really is one of those important features. It's kind of at the center of a lot of different processes. Some of it really simple, some of it everyday stuff, but as we've seen in our use cases, some of it really business critical for a lot of teams. Again, simple topic, but it's at the center of so many important things from what we see. So I'm really curious to see, are people aware of what they've got going, or are they gonna, see something exciting today? Maybe. Let's see.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, looks like a good majority of us are using the Salesforce, sending files to Salesforce already. That is great. I hope today we're looking at the Salesforce Workflow Connector, so maybe you can see something new if you're using the Form native Salesforce connector, of how to do it, what to do, and then also kind of get some little tips and tricks as well as we go through. So let's talk about what we're going to be covering today. So as we stated, today's goal is really simple. We're just wanting to focus in on how to send those file uploads over to Salesforce. And they can really be used so many different ways to accomplish a lot of different business needs. And where those files come from can come from a lot of different places. You can have a respondent have a file upload in the field. You can have respondents upload multiple files with that repeatable file upload. Or, maybe you want to have FormAssembly generate a custom document to send over to Salesforce, or maybe even have a document that gets signed before being sent to Salesforce. We're going to walk through each of these scenarios today. And as Skylar said, this is going to be a hands-on build-along style webinar. So rather than spending time here in the slides, once I get started, we'll be over in FormAssembly and Salesforce directly, seeing how that entire process from start to finish is built out. And if you are wanting to kind of see or poke around, everything I'll be building is going to be in the Salesforce Workflow Connector within our workflow feature. So you can follow along, click the buttons if you'd like to. Now, if you've worked with FormAssembly before, I also want to say you may be familiar with our Form native Salesforce connector. And most of what we'll cover early on today can absolutely be done there. And I'll indicate which portions can be done with both. But for today's webinar, though, I want to focus in specifically on the Salesforce Workflow Connector, because it gives us a lot more flexibility and supports some more advanced file uploads and those file features with workflow. And especially in the scenarios we'll build later today, those are going to be workflow specific ones. So with that,
I just want to reiterate the timeline there, in case either you're new to FormAssembly or you haven't been to a lot of these trainings before, get you up to speed on some of the FormAssembly lore there. Like the product and platform itself is hitting its 20th year this year, right? So as you can imagine, it started out as that form builder. Over the years, we built a Salesforce connector for that form builder. A number of years ago, we introduced workflows to the platform, so not just an individual form with some logic attached to it. You can add those additional steps, carry out whole processes in a workflow that you build. So just last year, we launched the workflow, the Salesforce connector for workflows, right? So again, just to get you up to speed on the timeline and what Joel was reiterating there, a little bit of a difference there if you haven't kind of experimented with the different parts of the platform. But yep, just clarifying that before we get into the demonstrations.
Thank you, Skylar, for that extra clarification. But yeah, so after we've done all of that and gone through, we'll just cover some quick best practices, kind of some of the reiterations of things that I'll be covering as we're going through, but just kind of a refresh there at the end. And then at the very end, definitely we'll have plenty of time for questions. So as we're going through, feel free to at any point put those questions in that Q&A box, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end. So definitely put in all of your questions there. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with our first thing. So we're going to send a single uploaded file to Salesforce. Give me just a moment to share my screen, and we can kind of go over what we're going to be doing. So this is a extremely common use case. One that I've seen so many customers use is just sending that single file to Salesforce. And before we get into the workflow builder, I do want to kind of go over the form and what we're doing so you guys can kind of have an idea in your head of what we're doing. This is the form I'll be using, but if you're wanting to follow along, definitely use any form that you have a file upload field. All of them will work. So for today, we have a conference registration form where attendees can fill this out. And as part of the registration, we're asking them to upload a resume. And we want this resume to be automatically sent to Salesforce so it's available for our next steps in the registration process. So now that we've seen this form, let's go ahead and hop over to our workflow builder. So here, I've already gone ahead and added that form, a Stripe connector, and a thank you page. So all we'll be building today is going to be that Salesforce connector, which you can just click add a step, zoom out a little bit, and then we have this connector where I can select the Salesforce connector. And from there, I can go ahead and authorize it, and we can start configuring. So the first thing I need to decide once I added the Salesforce connector is where do I want this file to live in Salesforce? In my case, I want to send the file to my Salesforce files and have it be related to a contact record. So I'll start this connector by looking up a contact record. So I'm just going to rename this action to look up contact, and then add the parameters, look up a contact record, and just go through mapping this. So the lookup query, I'm going to use the email address from Salesforce equals the email address from the form. And then the last things, if matching or no matching records are found, set those settings up. The last thing I want to be sure to do here before moving on is I need to save the contact ID as a variable, because I'll need it in the next action when I actually send that file over to Salesforce. So here in the lookup mapping, I'm going to map the Salesforce contact ID instead of a form field to a variable and title this variable contact ID. And that'll allow me to use it here in the second action that I'll add. And this action will be send resume. And here, I will go ahead, and these actions make it really easy. There's an upload a file action right there. So we'll upload a file, and here, for the record type, I can choose to either send it as an attachment or content version. Now, attachments are Salesforce's older file model, while content versions are part of Salesforce files, and which Salesforce recommends for most modern implementations. And unless your organization specifically uses attachments, content versions are going to usually be the better choice, and they're going to be the one that I'm going to be using today. So once I've selected that, I can then select which file upload from my form I want to send. So that's going to be that upload your resume file. And then the only required mapping from here is going to be that first published location ID. And this is what tells Salesforce exactly what this file should be related to and where it should be visible in Salesforce. And since I want it to be related to that contact record, I'll go ahead and map it to a variable and select that contact ID that I created in that first action. Now, one additional thing that I like to map is going to be the file title. This is not a required one. It'll automatically fold in the title name from the file upload, but I prefer to have a standardized naming convention for all of my Salesforce files. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and choose a value or formula. And if I open up the formula editor, I can go ahead and say, great, I want to combine the respondent's first name, space, and the respondent's last name, dash, resume. And then now, every time a resume is uploaded to my Salesforce, it'll automatically change the title of that resume to the respondent's first and last name. So I can go ahead and click Save there. And that is the connector all configured for this first step, just sending that single file over. So we can go ahead and click Save here in the workflow. And if we want to go ahead and test it, once it finishes saving, we can come in here and I can put in the person, which is going to be Stella Pavlova. There's Stella's email address. We'll do a professor of engineering with Mount Olympus, and for the industry, let's say, she's going to be in healthcare. And so then we can just select the attendance type and upload that resume. There we go. Perfect. And you can see the file title is just resume, which, you know, if it is directly on that contact, easy to read, but it's not the easiest if I want to have a standardized naming convention, because the respondent can put in whatever they want there. Then we can go over to the Stripe connector that I added and just quickly complete that response here. And once we do that, we can see what goes on. Perfect. And With that, we should have it be sent over to our Salesforce. Yep, there's our page redirect. So if we go to my Salesforce, we've got Stella's record right here. If I refresh the page and scroll down, we can see here in the notes and attachment, Stella's resume that just came through. And we see that custom name as well. And so that is great to go. And we have that first single file upload. Now, what if you want to make this a little bit more, realistic? What if you don't know how many times someone needs to upload a file? If they have several files they need to upload, how can you go ahead and allow them to have as many files as they need to upload? And that's going to be using those repeatable sections. And there's so many different ways that you can use that. I know, Skylar, you've seen several different ways that people have used those repeatable file uploads. Do you want to share a few?
Yeah, this really is one of those ones, right? When we go to our events, or I host some of these trainings and stuff, and our customers come up to us, at the booth, and we're kind of getting high fives from some of our customers. These are those use cases. It's not just that they like the name FormAssembly or like FormAssembly Blue or something. It's like we were on a small team. We had this manual process, say at a higher ed institution, where it used to be one individual form or one individual form fill, one submission kind of per person. But when they added these sort of repeatable sections, say you wanted to add kind of multiple events happening at the event, or at a campus event, or multiple add-ons, or I was doing something like a race and I wanted to get multiple people signed up for a team. Like, these were things that the people were kind of solving with one-off submissions. And once they figured out this kind of repeatable section, repeatable form fill through Salesforce, and the associated repeated file upload with it, it's like all happening, on the form filler side, kind of in one experience, right? And it may seem like a small thing, but these teams come up to us and are like, this was so much manual work, or we were chasing people down to get the following step done every single time. Once we figured out these repeatable sections or repeatable file uploads, it just made our small teams lives so much easier, and we didn't have to do kind of advanced magic with our Salesforce admin or anything like that. So again, like you heard me saying towards the top, it's a simple subject today, but once you see this in action, start to think of some of your own use cases where like repeatable sections or repeatable file uploads might come in handy for some of your business processes. Hopefully those light bulbs start going off for you too.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, there's so many different ways that you can use this, and I've just love it. And with that, we can kind of see one example of that is we can build on this conference registration form that we were just using. And so this time, instead of just the resume, I want to go ahead and, oh, I'm on the wrong form. Give me just a moment. I'm like, ah. There we go. Here's the right form. So with this, I also want to be able to allow my registrants to be able to apply to be a speaker at one of the open sessions. And so with this, I'm going to have them upload all of those speaker application documents. That's going to be their application, their speaker notes, the slide deck, any other supporting material that they want to include to say, this is why I should be a speaker at the conference. I want to allow them to be able to upload all of that. So you may notice that here, this is going to be especially important when you're working with the workflow connectors, is instead of making the single file upload field repeatable, I actually have it inside a section that I have made repeatable. And so you do not want to have the individual field repeatable. You want to have that section be repeatable. And that's going to be how our workflow connectors know to process each uploaded file correctly. And with that, applicants can now upload as many supporting documents as they need to this registration form. So we can kind of go back into our workflow builder here. And with this one, we can just continue building on that workflow that we have. So we saw those first two. We'll go ahead and add a third action to this, where we'll upload repeatable speaker documents. And with this one thing that I want to add before we move on is going to be one of my favorite things with Workflow Connector specific features. And that's going to be a precondition. And I just find preconditions so immensely helpful because you can come in here and say, great, if this condition is not met, I want this to not run or something like that. In my case, I want it to be based off of if that speaker documentation is blank, then I do not want this to run. So coming in here, if I find that speaker documents, you will see if you're trying to use the speaker, you're going to see all of the metadata information for that file upload. So you can use any of these for the precondition. I typically just use file name because every file has to have a name. So we can just do that. And then I want to say, okay, great. What should be met to execute this action? And I want this action, that file name, is not blank. And I want this action to only run when the file name is not blank. And this is especially helpful when it comes to repeatables, as with Workflow Connectors, you're able to use these preconditions and formulas with repeatables so that you can allow for that repeatable optional fields in your forms. And this action will never run if a file is not uploaded. And this is definitely doable with the repeatables and repeatable file uploads in our form native connectors. But you do need to take a few more details into consideration when you're doing this versus here in Workflow, you can just use those preconditions and be able to skip those repeatable file uploads very easily. And that's kind of one of the things why I love it so much. And so then we can move on to the parameters. Now, this is going to be very similar to what I just built with the second action of uploading a file, selecting a content version. And for the sending file, I'm going to select that speaker applications document. And then finally, that first published location ID, where I want to live in Salesforce, is going to be that contact ID again. I click value formula instead of the variable. There we go. And with that, we can go ahead and save it and submit a response. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So we can go ahead and let's just do Stella again. And we'll just say she's, again, professor of engineering at Mount Olympus in government, and she's going to attend in person, and she does want to apply to be a speaker. And we can upload her resume, and then here in the speaker application documents, she can go ahead and add as many as she wants to this form. So we can go ahead and upload what she wants to send over for part of her application. And you can see I've got just 3. So I can remove that or I can leave it. It's not going to be an issue. Click register now. And then we'll get redirected to our Stripe connector again. Finish out this test response. And click pay. And that's the thank you page. And so if we come over to our Salesforce again, let me refresh the page so we can see those new files. And right down there, there's the resume. Oh, that's okay. Sometimes it doesn't like me, but we'll just go ahead and submit another response. There we go. I must have opened it before I hit save on the workflow. Sorry about that.
All good. Joel, while you fill this one out, again, I just want to go back to that first example, a little bit of underutilized, I think, piece where how you custom edited kind of that formula so that, as people are attaching things in these examples, you're not always getting a file that just says, resume underscore final, resume 2026 or something. Because of that, custom bit, you were taking the person's submitted, kind of first and last name and amending that file attachment name as well. To me, I don't know, it just made it so much cleaner on the back end and clearer on the Salesforce side when it does get attached. Um, it went by quickly in that first example, but another shout out to, that little bit of thoughtfulness, I think is great for my over-organized brain and how I wish Salesforce instances were so much cleaner.
Yes, exactly. I do love being able to have that custom title to just make it super clear in the Salesforce side of what's going on, how things are happening, and moving forward. Because it just makes it so much cleaner. Like the data cleanliness, making sure everything comes through, easy to read, because you can kind of see the difference here. Now that I actually opened the saved workflow instead of getting ahead of myself, we have that Stella Pavlova resume, really clear whose resume we're looking at. But these speaker notes, the reason why I didn't use a custom Nate title here is just because, things might change, but you can always use a formula here as well of what you want these additional speaker to application documents to be. But that'll be what it looks like. And there's our repeatable files uploaded right there to our Salesforce. And so they're just really so helpful to be able to send everything over to your Salesforce that you need right away and have everything there without having to worry about, oh, am I missing a document or did I get everything? They can just upload as many as they need to right away. Now, with that, we've been working primarily with files uploaded by respondents. Let's look at something where we have a generated document that we are producing. So the file isn't coming from the respondents at all. What can we do to send that file over to Salesforce? So with this, we're going to use that same conference registration form that we've been using, but I have this document template that I want to use with FormAssembly's document step and the advanced document generation to dynamically create this receipt for each of those respondents. So they can come in here, see their information, see their name, see their payment summary, see that their payment went through, all of that, and have FormAssembly generate this individually for each respondent. So I can just go ahead and download this as a Word document. Then coming over to FormAssembly, I can come in here. And right here is my Salesforce connector. Before it, I can go ahead and add a document step right there. And with that, we can go ahead and just upload the document step.
Yeah, Joel.
While that's uploading, I always like, yes.
I was going to say, while you get that one in there, I know we're showing off this example of the conference registration today, but this is one of those features and examples we just sort of finalized and got out there last year. I'm so excited when we get to show this one off, as you can probably tell sort of my voice, but you saw Joelle with sort of the finished form or kind of PDF that a lot of us might have as a result of one of these processes, right? Like the sort of finished conference registration form filled out. But as we go into this example and showing you how to generate one of these documents, seriously think of a lot of different ways that you might be able to use document generation or e-signature stuff. I know we've got people in the audience like from higher ed, so maybe you're thinking of applications you use to manage grant applications, things that require that document, require a signature on them. If you're in healthcare and you think of that sort of upfront patient consent form, again, requiring signature, requiring a document to be generated and stored somewhere. Financial services, I know we've got some people with those kinds of setups, all sorts of signatures and like proof of documentation required. So think about some of those use cases if you're in one of those fields or you've got documents that require signatures in some of your flows while we show you this sort of step-by-step setup. But again, you're going to get into it, but what Joel had was that finished document. Think about what fields from your form would you like to map, kind of onto that PDF? Where could we put the person's first and last name? Where could we put the signature that they add digitally onto the document before gets sent off. Okay, I'm not trying to be a spoiler. I'm just setting the scene a little bit because there's so many use cases for this example. So hopefully this is good.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Skylar. There is so many different ways that you can do this and have these documents custom generated and have them look a lot nicer than what are just generic response PDFs look like. You can have that custom branding with the document generation, and I really love that. And whenever I do generate documents, I do always like to have the step name titled just to make it a little bit easier instead of just the generate a document. And also versus like the Salesforce or Stripe ones, just to keep things a little bit straighter for myself as I go through. So I uploaded that template, and whenever you upload the template, it automatically reads and pulls out those document tags. And so I didn't show you too much when we were in there, just so that you can kind of see them being pulled over. But if we hop back over to that template, you do see these are going to be those tags, and that's what's going to get pulled over into your FormAssembly document step to be mapped. And so with this, I can just go through and select either the form field or a different mapping that I want to have these be mapped to. So I'll just go through, map these out. And for this receipt number, instead of a form field, let's go ahead and use a value or formula. And I'm going to pull through the workflow response ID as that receipt number. And the receipt date, we'll do a value or formula with local today. That'll automatically pull in the date that the response was submitted. And the total is going to be the total from the form. And then that payment status. So you guys have seen me been using the Stripe connector. One thing that I really love with workflows is that you're able to pull in things from different steps. So if I go through to my Stripe connector and the configuration, I've got in the checkout details a return variable for the payment status from Stripe returning to a variable payment status. And with this, I can have it be mapped here in the document step and say, yes, this payment was successful, or no, this payment did not go through, all with just that payment status variable from the Stripe connector. And with that, let me save, and then we can go ahead and get mapping that in our Salesforce connector. There we go, all saved. Be a little bit more patient myself, that I just keep telling myself. So then we can go ahead and add an additional action to our Salesforce connector. And this will be send receipt. Perfect. And here are the parameters. We're just going to upload a file again, and exactly like the other ones that we've done, content version, we'll select that generated document from that receipt step. And here we're just mapping that first published location ID. That's going to be that contact ID. That's where I want this to be shown in my Salesforce. So with that, that is all done. We can go ahead and click save. Be a little bit more patient, make sure it saves this time. And we can go through and submit yet another response. For this time, let's go ahead and use a different one so you guys can see how that looks for a different contact. So this time we'll do Ian Masterson. And he is an engineer at Phoenix, and he is going to be in education. In person, we'll do a speaker as well so we can see everything all in action. This time he just has the 2 files though. So we'll just do speaker application and the slides. And then we'll go through the Stripe authorization page, and we can see that payment successful when we view the generated document. Give it just a moment. Sometimes it takes a second to think. There we go. And with that, we'll click pay. It went through. get redirected to our thank you page. And if we come over to our Salesforce, it might take a little bit to generate that document. So I'll click refresh a couple times and click refresh again. Sometimes takes a moment for that document to generate. Unless I accidentally put Stella's email in again. Yep. Let's see. Okay. Wow. That is an error on my Salesforce. It just says that I have reached the Salesforce limit. So give me just a second and then we can kind of see, we can just view the response. But if we go through, that just sometimes happens with the developer accounts. If we view that downloaded response here, this will be what is sent over to my Salesforce. Did it kick off the... There we go. Okay, kicked me off the sharing tab. There we go.
There you go.
So we've got our conference registration receipt here, and that was sent over to Salesforce. And we can see all of those documents generated right there with the Ian Masterson, his email, and the payment status right there.
And just to reiterate that, right? Like if you haven't seen this feature in action before, I know the demonstration's, a little fast, but just before we showed you that, sort of ride along, click by click, we had the document here with file tags in there, right? Like instead of this finished document, you'd see name, colon, and there'd be like the name of a tag, like which maps to the name of that field sort of in your form. So once it's filled out and this is automatically generated, you can see that those tagged areas now have the value from that field filled in, as well as the receipt of how much was paid, stuff like that. Might have been obvious to some of you, but if not, or if this is the first time you're seeing that feature, that's kind of what's going on here, right? We're configuring that document beforehand. It has those sort of mapped areas where the data from the form is going to be mapped to on your finished document. And then once they hit submit, you see it generated for you and attached to Salesforce, especially in a non-dev Salesforce setup, huh?
Yes, yeah, the dev sometimes gets you, but I went through and I just deleted the files that we had previously uploaded to Stella. So our next example should go through without any issues. Yeah. Gotta love those live demos sometimes. Okay, but that's what the generated document. And if we go through and we continue in with the next example, is going to be sending a signed document to Salesforce. And with this document, I want to have them sign the speaker agreement for any time they want to apply to be a speaker. And I want to also send the speaker agreement over to my Salesforce so that I can make sure, okay, great, they have applied and they signed the speaker agreement. So going through the speaker agreement, and then down here at the bottom, I've got those e-signature tags that when I upload this to FormAssembly and the document step, it'll automatically say, hey, you might want an e-signature step. So if we come over here to my FormAssembly, we've got our document receipt step there. I'm going to go ahead and add another document step here where I can upload that speaker agreement. And this is where renaming comes in especially helpful, because if you have multiple documents that you're generating or something, having them be named, you can know, okay, great, I am pulling in the correct document to where I'm needing to send it or whatever. So here I've uploaded it and it did recognize those signature tags. So it's saying, hey, you might want to add that e-signature step. And here in the mappings, I'll just go ahead and map the first name, last name, org, and email. Perfect. Click save again. And we can go through and add that e-signature step right here. There we go. And with this e-signature step, when we come to the documents, it gives us several options that we can do. We can choose either just one of the generated documents, either that receipt or speaker agreement, or I can use the form response PDF. Now, I know I want the speaker agreement, but let's go ahead and actually send over both the receipt and the speaker agreement whenever they do need to sign it. That way they can see both at the same time. Then the last step of configuring this is going to be setting up the signer. And this is going to be normally the form field right up there, but I'm just going to put in my email address so that we can see how that works as well. So if you are wanting the form field, you'll just click form field and select the email field from your form. Then with that is all configured here. We can come into our Salesforce connector, and here in the configuration, we can add one last action to send over that signed response. And this will be the exact same that we've got previously with uploading a file, sending a content version. And for that send file, we can see here where it comes in really handy. So we have that generated document from that receipt, the generated document from the speaker agreement, and the generated document from the e-signature step. And so that way, if you're renaming those steps, you can make sure you're always sending the correct one. So the last step here is, again, just mapping that first published location ID where I want it in Salesforce to the contact ID. So let me go ahead and click save, go through. And here I can go ahead and get Ian's details again. And we'll send it over to Ian. Here. The resume. We'll just do one repeatable this time, just the application, and click register now. And as that loads, there we go. And go through and submit our Stripe payment. And this is just kind of like the real time. You can see it all in action as everything goes through. And how that all works and looks when you're actually doing any of these tasks for your own things. There we go. Okay, so then with that, we can come into our Salesforce and refresh the page. Oh, didn't delete quite enough data from my thing, but that's okay. Oh, nope, it is still waiting on the e-signature. Got ahead of myself again. So this is one thing. You can see it's waiting on the e-signature before it sends to Salesforce. So if I go into my email, and right here is my email to sign that. And we open up that email. This will be what that generated document looks like. And so your respondents can come down here and they can sign, type, whatever they'd like to do, and just go through and fill it out. And the date. And these are just additional tags that you can add here to your e-signature document. You don't have to have them. You can have just a single signature, but I went through to show what all you've got. And now this should go through to my Salesforce. When we come into my Salesforce, let me refresh it. And there we are. There's those documents that just came through. So here is that signed PDF. If we open it from our Salesforce, we can see, great, there's Ian's details that came through right here. And there is his signature. And that is just kind of one example of, I always recommend testing out every step. You never know what things you're going to come into contact with. And you can always fix things a lot easier there in the moment as you're going through step by step. So that kind of leads us into our final tips for success. So as I said, always testing incrementally. That is going to be a lifesaver for yourself. Seeing as you're building one step at a time, exactly like I did today, making sure that's working. And then if you do encounter an error, being like, okay, what's going on? Let me fix that right away, instead of having to go through, build everything and being like, where's the issue? Then you want to be able to use those preconditions whenever they make sense. They're especially helpful with optional or repeatable file uploads because they prevent connector actions from running unnecessarily or whenever no file has been uploaded. Then lastly, I always recommend, if you're in Salesforce, doesn't look like the file uploaded where it should have, or it did successfully run but you can't find it, double checking where you've mapped that first published location ID, that file location. Because sometimes if you are creating that, it might just go straight to Salesforce files and not actually be related to anything. And having that relationship allows you to view it where you expect it to be with that first published location ID. And one last feature that I definitely always think is worth mentioning is if you're on an enterprise or government plan, you have access to our secure file scan. And this allows uploaded files to be scanned before you're sending them over to your Salesforce, making sure everything's good to go right away and you're not doing anything that you should. Just that extra layer of security, I always say, is always nice. But then we've got, let's see, I do also want to say, if any of you guys saw anything that you don't have access to or would like to learn more about, or would like a live demo if you don't have access to like our workflow feature or that document generation or e-signature, definitely let us know if you'd like to have someone reach out from our account upgrades or see a demo or something. We can do that.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, a lot going on today, right? Kind of like I alluded to towards the beginning, FormAssembly is a 20-year-old platform. We understand people join us for these trainings on all levels of accounts. We've continued to support some of those, original accounts, original form builders from years and years ago. So if you're on a kind of a legacy account or you're not on one of those kind of team level accounts that may have access to workflows and stuff, you may have seen some new functionality today. And if you haven't been really close to some of the product releases within the last year or two, you might have seen some new bells and whistles on the screen today, things like that, that Stripe connector, taking care of payments, some of the additional functionality associated with workflows, document generation, multi-signer, e-signature stuff, all things that have been added to the product in the last year or two. Again, that may seem new if you've kind of just been locked into form building for 4+, 5+ years. So that said, if any of that sounds kind of new and exciting, or you're realizing, hey, we pay for like really simple DocuSign stuff to accomplish some of that same thing. We're already using FormAssembly. If that sounds interesting, absolutely hop on with us. We'd love to talk to you more about how to get your account with those features added to it. If you're new to FormAssembly, you saw something you like to say, but would like to go into more of an in-depth demo for it. The reason we put this poll up here is this is a super easy way to just kind of shortcut the usual process or areas of the website. Just give us a yes or a thumbs up on this poll, and we'll get someone in touch right after this. So there you go.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Skylar. And we can go ahead and open it up to questions. As I was going through, I know, Kayla, Skylar, was there any questions that stuck up to you that we should answer before we get into it?
I'd like to answer a question, please.
Okay.
Kayla.
Hi, everybody. So I saw a couple of questions in here about content version versus attachments and notes. Hello, I am the resident FormAssembly Salesforce nerd. So I'm just gonna give a little bit of info here. So attachments is Salesforce's legacy file storage system. But as of I think it was the Spring 17 release, I'm pretty sure it was Spring 17. Someone can fact check me if you want. But since the Spring 17 release, basically what happened was Salesforce changed how they wanted to store files long-term. So if you create like an attachment record, like specifically an attachment record with the attachment object, then it is visible in Salesforce Classic and it creates the old style attachment record. However, if you create a Salesforce file using content version, Salesforce, in terms of backwards compatibility, will actually show the file in that old UI for notes and attachments, as well as in Salesforce files. So Joelle actually didn't in her layout have Salesforce files as her related list. She had notes and attachments, which is maybe where some of those confusions came from. It's actually in Salesforce files. It's only in one location. It's not in like both locations. So as long as you're using content version, it's going to Salesforce files and it's going to their new modern system. So I just wanted to note that because I saw some people asking how to have it appear in the files related list instead. It's technically speaking showing up in both in Joelle's. She just only showed one of the two. So I just wanted to clear that one up as the Salesforce nerd before I pass it back to Joelle.
Perfect. Thank you, Kayla. Yeah, that's always good to kind of clear up. Yeah, definitely. I meant to say like they do appear in both, and mine is storing in the Salesforce files, but yeah, I just use the notes and attachment because that's just easier for me. That's standard. Okay, so then one of the questions that I've got is if there are any other requirements needed for attachment version versus content version. And with this one, that was asked by Katie, and that one, it's actually with the workflow connector, thankfully, there isn't really much difference. You're just going to map that first published location ID. And the only really additional things that you need to do is, like for me, I wanted to add in a custom standardized title. So I did that. If there's any other things that you would like to add, you can always certainly map those. Just that first published location is going to be the only required mapping for the Salesforce Workflow Connector. If you're using the form, there is going to be slight differences, but we definitely have documentation on the different mappings that you have to have for attachments versus content versions. So definitely check that out if you're using the form native Salesforce Connector. But the workflow, no difference. So super helpful there. And then the next question we've got is, what is first published location ID? So I've mentioned it a couple of times, but that is basically you telling Salesforce, hey, where do I want this record shown? What record do I want it related to, so that when I'm viewing that record, this file is also seen when I'm viewing that. For me, I use contact record. And so with that, having that contact record in that first published location ID, it'll be where Salesforce shows that file. If you use a case ID, it'll attach that file to the case ID and relate it to that case ID, so that then that relationship can work in Salesforce and show it when you view that record. So it's basically just that relationship and where you want it to be seen in Salesforce is that first published location ID. Skylar, did you see any questions that you thought would be good to ask?
Yeah, I mean, this one could be sort of a gotcha sometimes, but like Kayla popped on and she was talking about some of the legacy Salesforce setups, another platform that's been around forever. But related to that, if we're doing something like sending these files over, do you need to be wary of potential file size limitations when including these kinds of attachments?
Yes, that is always good to keep in mind. One, what we saw where my dev account ran out of storage, that one was a one-off. Most of the time you won't have that. The dev accounts are very low storage, but one thing that you do kind of need to keep in mind for file size when you have the FormAssembly forms in Salesforce is, for FormAssembly forms, you can upload up to a total size for all of the files uploaded to a response, 35 megabytes. Now, Salesforce does have a little bit of a freer element of each file size can only be 25 megabytes. So if you have, like, say, one file that is 27 megabytes and then the other one is 4 megabytes, that'll go through FormAssembly just fine, but it will throw an error when sent to Salesforce because that does exceed the 27 megabytes Salesforce enforces. That is going to be the standard one. I believe you can work with Salesforce to increase that if you need to, but that is something to kind of keep in mind what file size limit your Salesforce enforces for an individual file. But
yep.
yeah, hope that answered your question. Another one is, where might I find this document step if we don't have the workflow? So the document step is going to be a workflow specific feature. So if you have workflow and you don't see it when you are in your workflow builder, definitely reach out to your account manager or your CSM and inquire about it if that's something that you're very interested in. They can see about getting you a demo to see what that add-on would cost. And if you don't have workflow at all and you're interested in the feature, definitely reach out as well. And we can get you guys in touch to see what that document generation feature works like, and also just the Salesforce workflow connectors that we went through today.
Another interesting one, people get inspired by that, document generation step. If you haven't seen one of those, created or attached before, but they're thinking about, I think, probably their use case, some of the documents that they generate. What if, that example we use, or the contract or the lease agreement, whatever, what if it had multiple pages, like the PDF itself? Is that something that's supported? How would that show up in Salesforce if it is supported?
Yes, that is absolutely supported. The first example was just the one page, but the second, the signed one, was actually going to be 2 pages. And so we support up to, I believe, like as long as it's less than that 35 megabytes, you can upload it and have that document generated with the document steps. So definitely perfectly usable to have as many steps as or pages as you want to within that document template.
Yeah. And also to reiterate there, again, if this was new, you're kind of your first time seeing it, someone asking, is there a specific way we have to create that initial document in order for the template to be used? And I think we tried to point this out a little bit more, but yeah, just to reiterate, like what was going on in the document that you configured in order for it to end up with the data and the form field data, sort of filling out the document on the attached one.
Yes. So whenever you are generating the document, it does need to be either a Microsoft Word or a Microsoft Power document that you upload to the document step. And then from there, FormAssembly takes the form or workflow data, inputs it into the document, and generates a PDF for you. So that's kind of very automatic there. Really easy to kind of get it going and going through.
Yeah. And the only other additional is, we were talking about those document tags, right? But really, it's just in a curly bracket tag saying, data from which field of the form is going to be placed on that part of the document, right? Like that's the only additional step, is that, quote unquote tagging of the document, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool.
I think we've got time for one more question. Let's see. Perfect. Okay, so this one is a good question to ask and end on. We use the save draft option in FormAssembly. Is there a way to add a file in a prefill or show that the required upload field is actually complete? So if you use the save and resume feature in FormAssembly and you have like a Salesforce connector on that save option, you can definitely make those optional or have them use the preconditions as we've shown for that save connector so that it's not creating or sending those documents over multiple times. But then that way they can see, okay, great, like we're not having like 5 or 6 of the same document uploaded every time they save the form.
Yeah.
But I think that is it. Let's see.
Taking us pretty close. A few of these questions are related to diving a little bit deeper into some of the features that we showed on screen today. And additional ones can be answered in our pretty extensive help and documentation center. If you had questions related to just the form level Salesforce connector as opposed to the workflow level Salesforce connector, we've got a lot of documentation in there. If you're interested in getting into repeatables in general, or reading up on some of these features before you look at it, if you wanted to add something to your account, a lot of it in there. We've got a few links in that resources or kind of additional links section here in the webinar today that are going to be jump off points into our help documentation for some of those features you saw on screen. I think we've also even included a link to a previous webinar, previous kind of introductory training that we did for that document generation and e-signature step. If you liked that part of the demonstration, you wanted to learn more about the capabilities there or kind of what's required or some of that tagging step, and you'd love to see that kind of click-by-click demo of that, there's a link to an on-demand webinar when we introduced that feature in there. So that'll give you a full, 30 minutes to an hour of demonstration and discussion just on that. But as usual, we love to plug that help section because we've got a ton of technical documentation in there, learning about some of these features or kind of the step-by-step with them. So, we had to do some pretty specific examples today. We had to go fast, but that area is a great place to search around for things related to a certain feature or a certain use case that you have in mind. So definitely hop in there if you can. Otherwise, like we've said a couple times, we definitely did record this. We will be sending it out so that it becomes on demand as well. If you want to follow along with some of those previous sections and examples, be able to pause or slow down, feel free to use that recording. We'll get it packaged up and sent on the way here soon. I don't know if there's anything else, Joel or Kayla. I know this one, these kinds of examples inspire a lot of discussion, so happy to see all the questions, but unfortunately we're out of time otherwise. And we'll see you at the next one.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for attending. If we didn't get to your question, please definitely feel free to reach out to our support team. They can definitely help answer any questions if you're not able to find it in the resource center. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming and joining us today.
Really appreciate it. Have a great day. Thanks, y'all.